outreach started a month. Imagine if we had gotten our outreach starting a month ago. Gosh, we'd have like 9,000 people. Anyway, I'm delighted to have you all here. My name is Victor Gresser, and I am someone with lived experience. I live with and manage a serious mental illness, and I'm also I'm a peer counselor in the community, and I am a member of the Mad Mob, which is a small but growing and strong group of folks from the community. Today we're here to talk about, as you all know, conservatorship and how it impacts our community and the problems that it presents for us as folks with lived experience. We have 4 wonderful speakers today, 3 of whom have lived experience and are also passionate about making change and are advocates in the community. That's Imade Borha, Fancher Larson, and Erik Henriques. And Claudia Center and Carly Myers are both attorneys who have been working in their careers for disability rights with a special focus which includes mental health. So let me just use this PowerPoint that I created earlier today. So here's the agenda that we have planned for today. We'll do the welcome, and I have a little bit of housekeeping to do before we get started. And then we'll hear from Claudia Center, and then Imade Borha will speak. Fancher will follow her, and then Erik, and then Carly Myers will speak after an Erik's pose. Then we'll do some Q&A. We'll have a breakout session where folks will have an opportunity to talk with one another. We have a few questions designed, but it's an opportunity for you to sort of process the conversation. And then we'll come back together for a group discussion, and then we'll do appreciations and announcements. Wanted to just let folks know, as sort of not a legal disclaimer, but just to be mindful of the fact that this content can be challenging. Some of the experiences that our speakers either have witnessed or have experienced personally are not easy necessarily to hear. So just wanted to let folks know to take the best care of themselves. Take the best care of yourself as you possibly can. So here are some community comfort agreements so that the program runs smoothly. So make space and take space, meaning if you're someone like me who tends to talk a lot in a meeting, perhaps it might be a good opportunity to be more of a listener. Of course, do what you feel is natural and important for you. Let's see what we can learn here today. If in your conversations, when you make comments, try to speak from your own experience and use I statements. Sometimes when the content can be a little controversial, we can forget that everyone here is working towards the positive outcome. So try to remember that everyone has good intentions, whether you agree or disagree. And respect that we all have group knowledge and we're each learning from one another. Be patient and supportive of everyone's differences. Some people struggle more with the technology. Some people have difficulty projecting. So be patient and ask for what you need. You can do that in the chat. Take care of yourself, as I said during the meeting. If you need to go to the bathroom, get a drink of water, just take a deep breath, feel free. Sometimes when I'm in a meeting, I will actually turn the volume off so that I can sort of take a moment away. And then try to keep your comments focused on the topic at hand. Okay, so that's it for the community agreements and such. Let me just do a little housekeeping for folks who are early on in their experience with Zoom. So to make the meeting run smoothly and to prevent background noise, please mute yourself if you're not speaking. And if you're calling on the phone, press *6 to mute or unmute yourself and *9 to raise your hand. So if you have a comment and you're on the phone, plus *9 and then we'll acknowledge you, and then you press *6 to unmute. And then, of course, feel free to use the chat throughout the event. Peter Murphy, maybe Peter, you can wave your hand. He's available for tech support. So if you're having problems with your Zoom connection or some other tech support, you can chat him directly. And then afterwards, we'll send out a recording of the panel and resources including the chat. And you know, I'm delighted to see how many folks are here today. Consider joining the mob. You know, we meet twice a month, and we'll give you some more information about that at the end. So, and also Arise, which is a program that's organized through Mental Health Association, SF. So with that, how am I doing for time? Oh my God, I'm right on time. So let me go on. I will unshare my screen and introduce our first speaker, who is Claudia Center. Claudia is a legal director for Disability Rights Education and Defense Fund, where she litigates cases that increase civil rights and civil liberties for persons with disabilities, and represents the disability community in legislative policy, amicus, and appellate work. She was previously a senior staff attorney in the Disability Rights Program of the National ACLU Foundation, and the director of the Disability Rights Program at the Legal Aid Society Employment Law Center, which is now called Legal Aid at Work. And with that, I'll turn the time over to you, Claudia.
Thank you very much for the introduction, and I love the community agreements and just everything about how you all set this meeting up. I don't plan to speak too long, but I just wanted to give a short introduction to conservatorship, which is called guardianship in most other states, why it's a disability rights issue, and some of the goals of the disability rights community with respect to guardianship and conservatorship. Before I start, I will share that I am a person who has a lifelong psychiatric condition that's been serious at certain times in my life, but I have never been subject to involuntary treatment or conservatorship. And I appreciate and acknowledge the privilege that I have with my disabilities so far. So why is conservatorship or guardianship a disability rights issue? So under this law, under the different state laws that govern guardianship or conservatorship, you don't get placed under these statuses unless you're a person with a disability. It may be a psychiatric disability, it may be intellectual or developmental disability, it may be a disability associated with aging. Those are the biggest categories, but disability is the is like a prerequisite for being placed under conservatorship. And when a person is placed under conservatorship, some or all of their legal rights are taken away from them by the judge, by the probate court judge. So it could be all of their decisions, financial, social, personal, economic, or it could be a subset of rights. But some civil liberties, some decisions are removed from that person by the judge. So there is a removal of civil rights, civil liberties, and a removal of self-determination, sort of inherently in the process. And one of the assumptions of conservatorship is that people are either completely competent or they completely lack capacity, and that you can just assess somebody and they fall into one category or the other category. And if you have competency or capacity, then you have all your rights, and then if you're in the other box, you lack your capacity and you have no rights. When really we know in the disability rights world, in the MAD world, that it's a lot more complicated than that. People exist on a spectrum. The spectrum changes from day to day, from experience to experience. People do not live in a vacuum, so their ability to make decisions may change depending on what supports are available to them. It can change depending on what time of day it is, how their week is going. You know, a lot of supports, not just emotional supports, but also sort of supports with regard to our material world. Does the person have housing? Does the person have regular health care? So we see in our world, and probably many here, we see this all as very contextual, how much capacity somebody has and whether they can make their own decisions. So part of what the disability rights world wants to do is to enhance people's capacities and to fight really hard to get the supports in place that will make people empowered and able to make their own decisions, to have self-determination. And to, you know, assess people, if we're going to assess people for these kinds of legal statuses, to make sure that we really consider supports and consider people with supports in place. And we often call it supported decision-making. And a number of states have laws that endorse the concept of supported decision-making. And California does not yet have that kind of law. And we hope to get the legislature to adopt it now that we have the state's attention with Britney Spears. And this would be an alternative to conservatorship for people, so that the courts would be required to consider this alternative where people wouldn't lose their civil liberties from the probate judge and would instead have supports in the community. So one thing we want to do is reduce conservatorship and create supports and alternatives to conservatorship. And then to the extent that conservatorship still exists, we want there to be strong procedural rights so that someone gets a real notice that truly communicates what's at issue and what's going to happen. That someone has true representation. They can select their own lawyer, and that lawyer will truly represent the individual's stated wishes. That there will be a neutral hearing that is actually happens, and that the person's represented. There are some cases in California where conservatorship is granted, you know, without the subject person present and with their lawyer not saying anything. And it's just sort of, you know, pro forma. So we want a true hearing, and we want there to be more safeguards around self-determination and more deference to the person's stated wishes, even if, you know, we still end up with conservatorship. In some cases, we still want people's stated wishes to have some weight. And that's all I'll say for now. I will, I'm actually on the East Coast, so I'm in like my 9th hour of Zoom, so I may not make it to the very end of this program, but I'm going to be listening to all the speakers, and I'm so glad to hear them all.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Claudia. Unmute myself. Can you all hear me?
Yeah.
Here I am. You can hear me, okay. Thank you so much, Claudia, for that opening introduction to the issue. So now I'd like to introduce Imade Borha. Imade is a writer and a mental health advocate who founded Depressed While Black. She is a suicide attempt survivor who lives with clinical depression and borderline personality disorder. Imade first developed Depressed While Black as her 2015 Columbia University nonfiction creative writing MFA thesis. Depressed While Black has grown into an online community and an in-progress book, and is now a 501c3 nonprofit that donates Black affirming personal care items to psychiatric patients and connects people to Black therapists. And without further ado, I'll turn over to Made.
Thank you so much for having me, and just shout out to the Mental Health Association of San Francisco, my family out there in San Francisco. Really appreciate you all so much. I used to work there. So yeah, I have been involuntarily hospitalized twice. On paper, it actually says that I was admitted voluntarily. There's a lot of things that go on that can cause you to have coercion so that you're forced in there against your will. And so the first time that I was hospitalized, I was forced to take lithium, which is the same medication that Britney Spears was forced to take. And basically they were just like, you can't get out of here unless you take lithium. And at that time, I was getting more information from my fellow patients about lithium and the potential side effects that I was getting from the actual psychiatrist. Because a lot of times when you're hospitalized, you may see a doctor for maybe 5 minutes tops. And so it was a scary time for me. And I was just getting all this information from, it may affect your liver, it may do this to your body. And basically what they said was you have to have a certain amount of lithium in your blood levels in order to be discharged. And so I had to get my blood checked almost every day. And that was the make or break for me to get out of there. And so for folks who are hospitalized involuntarily, it can be really difficult to get out. It's basically the system is set up for you to not get out. When I was petitioning to get out of that first hospital that I was in, I was assigned a hospital lawyer, and that hospital lawyer was so afraid to get on the floor that I lived on and slept on every night. And she literally said that I'm afraid to just be here, you know, for the 30 minutes. And so it made me feel frustrated because I'm like, if you're afraid to come here for 30 minutes, then why am I here sleeping here and staying here for 24/7, you know, hours a day? Like, why is this happening? And so I was assigned a hospital lawyer, and the experience of going to the judge was basically a setup, and kind of what was mentioned before about kind of pro forma. It's like the act of having a court case, but you don't really have a true court case. And so they required that I come to the court in a stretcher. Like I was literally on a stretcher with a hospital gown. And I knew from the very beginning that I was set up to not be heard and to be ignored, because the power dynamics of having a hospital gown compared to the psychiatrist is in business attire, it already sets you up to not be heard, to be ignored, to be marginalized. And so I came in on a stretcher in a hospital gown and hospital socks. Also what happened was that the psychiatrist talked first. So I wasn't even able to present my case. I had to wait for the psychiatrist to speak. And the psychiatrist basically said on the witness stand that I would that if my mom took me home and drove me back to North Carolina, that I would jump out of the car. Like, she literally said this. This is the type of commentary and viewpoints that some psychiatrists and mental health professionals say about folks who are involuntarily hospitalized and conserved. It's almost as if they don't even know us. They barely talk to us for maybe 5 minutes. And so sometimes what they say has nothing to do with who you are. It has everything to do with racial stereotypes and ableist stereotypes. And so a lot of times they'll say things that have nothing to do with you, but because they're in a position of power, they're being heard and their opinion is being elevated. And so I try to eloquently present my case. And that court system, it also is very ableist, and it forces you to create this illusion of being able-bodied when you're in a mental health crisis. I shouldn't have to fight for basic human rights when I'm in a mental health crisis. I should be supported in love, and I shouldn't have to be scrapping just for the bare minimum of respect. So I tried to present my case, but of course the state Supreme Court judge was just not having it. And so I had to stay there for another week. And so these are the things that happen, and especially for Black folks that are being involuntarily hospitalized. A lot of times we're placed at the bottom of the psychiatric hospital ladder. So we're placed on the most restrictive floor with the least therapeutic care. So the place that I was first placed on, it was very chaotic. It was really scary for me, and none of us were receiving specialized care, nor did we get privileges like being able to go outside or having access to our phones for part of the day. But during my second hospitalization, where I was threatened and told that, either I come in, voluntarily, or they'll force me into less privileges involuntarily, I noticed that after I was compliant, which is kind of the word that some mental health professionals use to determine how well you follow the rules, how well you accept whatever is being given to you. And so after I was compliant for a week during my second hospitalization, I was promoted and moved up to a floor with mostly white people. And I noticed on this floor of mostly white people that they had access to their phones for parts of the day. They had access to kind of go outside and have more responsibilities. And I noticed there was a huge racial divide that goes on in these centers as well. And so I think what I've learned through these experiences is you really need outside help. Folks can be really dismissive of your experiences, of what you go through. And a lot of times it's like everything that you say is through the lens of, well, you're here, so I don't believe you. Well, you did X, Y, and Z right before you got admitted, and so you deserve this punishment. And there is this kind of punitive nature to psychiatric hospitalization that doesn't make any sense, because the people that are the most sick, the most vulnerable, should be given the most tenderness, the most kindness, the most softness. And so that is kind of some of the things that I experience.
Thank you, Imade, for your sharing your experience with us. Next, we have Fancher Larson. Fancher has been a patient rights advocate at San Francisco Mental Health Clients' Rights Advocates for 35 years plus. And she's an active member of the Mad Mob and Senior Disability Action, and has lived experience as a mental health consumer. And not only has she done outstanding work with folks who are struggling to access their rights, she is a mentor and a role model for many of us within the mental health community. So let me turn it over to Fancher now. Thank you, Fancher. You're muted still.
Yes, now here I am. Thank
Here you
you
are.
very much. I my goodness. I also have a child who has, who's 630, how old is he? 38 right now, who has a lot of difficulty, and I take care of him. And I have to take care of him. But I just want to say that I really loved the prior people that spoke, especially that one right before me, because I am a former client, and I got here in my late 30s, and after receiving ECT treatments, because I couldn't walk and I couldn't urinate because of the medication that they'd given me. And this had started back when I was younger, when I was a child. Actually, when I was about 15, I had ECT. And then I was also shipped out to some kind of place to be taken care of, and I was locked up there. And and I was also been hospitalized. I eventually had gotten somewhat together, and I married, but then when I started having difficulty, I wound up back in the hospital. My husband paid to have me stay there for like a year, I guess. And I have had a lot of difficulties. So when I got here to San Francisco, I don't know if I want to talk about all my symptoms. When I got here to San Francisco, I found the ex-patient movement. And they saved me. It wasn't the doctors. And I had decided that it was all my fault. What had happened to me was all my fault. I hadn't done anything right, and I wasn't appreciative, and I wasn't helpful, and I didn't know what I was doing. And but I found, and I was blaming myself for all the difficulty. And that's the thing that happens with people, often in the same ways. The services, people think people need to be helpless and controlled, and they believe that it's a lifelong permanent condition from which they never recover, and they require rehab, remodels, or stabilization and maintenance. And it sounds really pretty awful, doesn't it? So I was so happy when I found my people, because we accepted each other. We weren't separated persons. We shared experience, a positive healing experience. I went with Leonard Frank to the supervisors of the county back in the day, and I got them to stop ECT for a while at the hospital, San Francisco. So we have to be there for people. We have to be there. We have to listen to them. This is something that the staff doesn't know how to do. They're not a diagnosis, and they shouldn't be spoken to in authoritative tones or because they're confused or agitated. And they might be scared. Treat them as you would want to be treated. I think we need to train them too. So we need to also all identify our biases. Our biases influence us. And the professionals don't think they have any biases, but they do. So let's see. Terms like chronic illness should be gotten rid of, and it becomes a self-definitive thing. And this is used to define disability and symptoms. Chronic, it's going to go on forever. I have my difficulties too now, and so medication is not always the answer. Medication, if you give me Haldol, I will start running around the room. I cannot tolerate Haldol, and a few of the other things that I won't go into. And people have different medication responses. It can or not work. They're addicted to medication. And they have a lot of very bad reactions. So that's something that needs to be addressed. And I think that we just made people so, clients are expected to be flexible and understanding and remain cooperative. That's the major thing you can do. Don't let the providers down. And I appreciate the providers that really are angels. that are so good it has a better understanding. People are 5150 because the system has failed them. People are not 5150 because of mental illness. They can't remain healthy. They're 5150 because they can't remain healthy because of a lack of support in the community and housing and treatment. And that's what we're trying to bring. Clients experience unrelieved stress, and this brings on symptoms. Hey. So clients report experiencing this, a critical loss of trust and well-being. These are some notes here that I wrote down. It's also the loss of everything. So conservatorship? Oh, conservatorship. Well, I didn't realize, I work mostly with the yearly conservatorship kind of issue, usually with people. And then of course we have attorneys that attend to working with them if they're trying to challenge conservatorship.
While I'm checking emails and doing other work. Oops.
So I don't know how long I've been talking now. I don't know if it's been any long, but I think what happens is people get caught up and they're in conservatorship. They never learn how to take care of themselves. They don't have a community. They don't have people that are working with them and helping them. They're told what to do. They can't manage money. They don't know what to, and they lose their whatever skills they had. They have to obey. They have to obey. And if they do that, then they're considered better. And so I think conservatorships can be used in a way that can help people. But it depends on how you work with them, because they're important and they have to be the primary important person in that whole situation. And so we have to change that. I think I'm talking too long. Anyway.
You're fine. You've got about 5 minutes.
5
Fancher.
minutes?
If you'd like, yeah. But it's up to you.
So I don't know, for a system that told people that they lack insight and judgment and act towards them like they don't know how to think, create a loss of self-esteem and initiative, and contributes to dependence. It's terms like a chronic disease. And those are assimilated and become self-definitive. And we have to stop that. And I don't know, we need more advocates. We do. We need more advocates. We need more advocates that have had some experience. And anyway, I love you guys. Imade, I love you.
I love you too.
May I please talk also? Raya and Victor.
I'm sorry, who's
Let me
speaking?
allow. Okay.
I'm sorry, who's
I want
speaking
to-
now?
Okay. So I just
Oh,
want to.
Ilya?
Yes,
Hi.
yes, Ilya.
Hi, Ilya. Hi,
Hi.
we're gonna have Q&A as soon as Erik and Erik and Carly are finished. Can you hold
yeah,
on?
I'm sorry.
That's
Yes.
quite all right. That's quite
Thank
all
you.
right. I'm glad you're excited about the program. If you
Thank
can just
you.
hold on for about maybe 20, 25 more minutes. Thank you. So next I'm going to introduce Erik. Erik Henriques is the Mental Health Association of San Francisco's Director of Peer Services, and he is a peer living in recovery with mental health challenges. He's a passionate advocate for those who have experienced mental health struggles. And with that, I'll turn it over to Erik after I thank Fancher for her sharing. I forgot to do that. Thank you so much. Erik, it's all you.
Good. Can everybody hear me? Thumbs up. Good afternoon, everybody. As Victor said, I'm Erik Henriques. I am the Mental Health Association of San Francisco's Director of Peer Services. And as I always tell folks in these presentations, most importantly, I am a peer living in recovery with mental health challenges. My particular diagnosis is schizoaffective disorder. And what that diagnosis means to me is that I live with a combination of schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. And I actually, that term is helpful for me. I know some folks have challenges with diagnosis in those terms, but that term has been historically helpful for me because it's a framework for me to help me understand and manage the symptoms of this disorder. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share with you all a story of trauma and a story of hope and positive outcomes based on my lived experiences. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about my history and then how, more recently, my history has led to some positive outcomes and changes in my life. So there's some trigger warnings and content warnings with my story. So again, I'll be brief with my story. So in 1980, I'm currently 57 years old. I ran away from home from Grand Junction, Colorado with two female friends who I went to high school with. At the time, I was having struggles with my sexual orientation and my sexual identity and my sexual orientation. And I ran away here to San Francisco, and I was on the streets briefly. And I saw San Francisco a year before HIV and AIDS was even heard of. It wasn't until 1981 that the public heard of HIV/AIDS. And during this time period, I was in the early stages of my diagnosis. I lived in some questionable, sketchy circumstances in San Francisco for about 9 months. And probably the most significant aspect of my diagnosis at the time that I experienced was pretty significant depression. So in 1981, I returned home to Grand Junction, Colorado, and there I made a suicide attempt. And I was hospitalized in a local psychiatric ward in Grand Junction, Colorado. And my parents and my doctors at the time, being psychiatrists at the time, thought that I was not doing well, meaning that I was not doing well in terms of my mental health. I'm not exactly sure in retrospect what all the conversations in the background were about, but it was determined that I was not doing well. And so I was transferred via a very small sheriff's plane from Grand Junction, Colorado's airport. I was shackled, my legs were shackled, handcuffs were put on my hands, and I was put in a sheriff's plane with another patient from the psych ward who was also transferred to the Colorado State Hospital. She was much older than me. So I arrived in the Colorado State Hospital, and there I spent a year and a half. I was on the adolescent ward initially, and as a minor, my stay there was decided by my parents. On March 10th, 1982, which is my birthday, I was transferred to the adult ward. I had a total stay in the Colorado State Hospital for a year and a half. Let me describe you what a state hospital setting is about. They're very old structures that were probably built in the 1930s. They consist of caged windows. It's a combination of very ill patients who are delusional. Some of the folks have violent offenses. I mean, a lot of the fellow patients that I spent time with at the time, it was mind-blowing for me. It was just absolutely mind-blowing. I mean, there were young people that were in there for murder due to their psychiatric conditions and arson. And it just went on and on and on. Physical restraints and chemical restraints were common practice in these places. I actually saw folks who were physically restrained and taken to the showers and had leather masks, something out of Silence of the Lambs you would see, because they were biters and spitters. And I mean, much of the time spent in this place was mindless activities. I mean, we paced. There was not much to do. There was some activities during the day. I mean, for example, I participated in continuing education. I was a high school student, so I engaged in some type of education. But the measures to control us by the staff on the units were very punitive. And I experienced sexual assault and sexual coercion by other patients and staff members in the state hospital. And essentially, they're just a place to warehouse folks. So what do I mean by chemical restraints? It's where if people are kind of emotionally elated or the staff decide they're not doing well, they basically inject you with antipsychotics to calm you down, to make you behave or whatever they're looking for. My just a side note, my thoughts on medications. I've taken so many medications over the years. I do realize that psychiatric medications are torture, but then again, with the right combination, I've been on 2 antipsychotics for about 15 years that actually have put me into a much better place. So I've seen the awful sides of medications, but I've also seen the more positive sides of medications. So upon discharge from the Colorado State Hospital, I was placed in a halfway house in Grand Junction. I was there for about a year, 9 months, a year. And then when I was 19 years old, I went to Denver and was briefly homeless and had a mental health setback. And there I was placed in a psychiatric nursing home. I was 19 at the time, like I said, and I was primarily in an institution. It was a community-based institution that was primarily folks who were in their 40s, 50s, 60s, and they had been in state hospitals for decades. And they were placed in a psychiatric nursing home. It was more community-based treatment, but it was again, it was a very confusing time for me to be in a facility such as that. That led to, after I left the psychiatric nursing home, I spent some time in board care homes, and this was the early stages of my developing the psychotic aspects of schizoaffective disorder. And I actually had a long-term, probably about 6 months, I was completely psychotic, where I was wandering the streets of Denver, Colorado, and just completely lost and had no idea what was going on, essentially. My sense of reality was completely lost. And so I was again hospitalized, this time again in a state hospital in the Denver area called the Fort Logan State Hospital. So I was there for a year and a half. So in 1985, I was on a pass. I had the privileges to go out into the community from Fort Logan State Hospital. And I fled. I basically left. I left and I went to the Denver airport, and I bought a one-way plane ticket to San Francisco. And here I was briefly homeless, and I made a self-harm attempt. I cut myself with razor blades, and I went to the St. Francis Memorial Hospital, which is in San Francisco. And I was hospitalized there. And there I was sort of, what I would like to say, I was voluntold to have ECT, which is shock treatment. In the early 80s, early mid 80s, ECT was quite intense. It was it was a pretty intense experience. Fast forward many years later, I think that ECT has been developed and evolved to a point that it can do some positive impact on people's lives, but this was a very different time. So I had 4 of these shock treatments, and I was experiencing severe amnesia. It was really frightening for me, and I refused the additional 8 treatments that they had prescribed. And so I was transferred to the Napa State Hospital here in California for a year and a half. So I have spent time, I've been in 3 state hospitals for 3.5 years. I mean, for a total of 1.5 years, which means that I've spent 4.5 years of my life in state hospitals. Many years later, let's fast forward to 1995, and I started college. I had started work with a psychologist in Denver, and I worked with her for 20 years. And one of my assignments was I wanted to go to college, so I went to college, and there I got a bachelor's degree in social work. And my dream at the time, when I was an undergraduate student in social work, was to essentially be an advocate for folks who have been part of the mental health system. I wanted to sort of take my experiences that I had and transfer them into something more positive. And then in 1999, my husband Tom and I moved to San Francisco, where I got my first full-time job ever as a case manager serving low-income families in the Bay Area. And I continued to work with my psychologist. I moved, but it was telephone therapy. 2004, I went to grad school. I did some MSW, Master's in Social Work, degree work. And then I had another mental health setback during this time period, and I did not complete the program. And to this day, I still have not finished the program. And during this time period, I struggled with being unemployed for a few years, but thankfully my husband of 26 years was there to support me during this time period. So fast forward again to 2014. So I interviewed for a position at the Mental Health Association of San Francisco. It was a warm line counselor position. So I began my my sort of adventure and my adventure and in peer work, peer support work in 2014. For about 6 months, I was a part-time warm line counselor on the newly formed warm line, and CW, who many of you know, he and I were the first 2 warm line counselors back in the day. And then I was promoted to being a warm line coordinator, which I did for a year. And then for 4 years, I was the manager of the Mental Health Association of San Francisco's Marin County Crisis Continuum program, in which I worked alongside mental health clinicians to provide peer support services to those who live with mental health challenges, who are having a mental health crisis. And so that was incredibly valuable work, to work alongside mental health clinicians and educate them to what peer recovery is. And so how did I get to a better place in my life? It had to do with the support of family, friends, my husband, Tom, a college mentor who's still one of my best friends, and the psychologist who I work with, who I mentioned, I worked with her for 20 years. And as a long-term consumer of mental health services, which includes social work, therapy, case management, psychiatry, I have learned that there is a viable, positive alternative to conservatorship. My experiences with conservatorship were in the state hospitals that I had been in. So this viable alternative to conservatorship is peer support. And what peer support means to me, it's a form of social support in which the support is provided by a peer who in some ways has similar fundamental similarities to the recipient of support. And this relationship is one of equality, where relationships with psychiatry and social workers and therapists, they're hierarchy based. So I come from a perspective where a peer counselor, a peer specialist, a peer supporter, peer provider, whatever you want to call us, folks, is that we've been there and we've done that, and we can relate to others who have been in similar situations. So that's been a lifesaver for me in recent years, is peer support. And so how more recently I've turned my trauma from the past into a positive experience is, so it was late last year, the St. Francis Foundation had a grant opportunity for the St. Francis Hospital. I mentioned that I had been hospitalized at the St. Francis Memorial Hospital and received ECT shock treatment there back in the day. And so I worked with MHSF's grant writer, and we put together a fabulous grant proposal, and this led to the grant proposal being funded. And what this grant proposal, it's a program that I created with the grant proposal writer with the St. Francis Memorial Hospital, again funded by the St. Francis Foundation, in which this aspect is currently on hold, but it won't be on hold much longer as far as I'm concerned, is that having having peer counselors on the psychiatric unit at the hospital, providing one-on-one and group support every weekday evening. And this part has actually just more recently come into play, is so the peer counselors who I oversee are providing peer counseling post-discharge support to folks who have been hospitalized on the unit. So what the peer counselors do in this program is individuals who have been hospitalized on the St. Francis Memorial Hospital unit. They're eligible for post-discharge support, which includes navigating various social service, mental health, healthcare, and community resources, as well as wellness-focused peer counseling, And just kind of the companionship that comes with working for with a peer counselor. So, and also we also provide these similar type of services to individuals who have accessed the emergency department at St. Francis Hospital for psychiatric crisis. So that's a little bit about my story. Yeah, that's all I have to say. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Eric. Well, that was a very affecting story. Thank you so much. We're so glad that you have made it through. There were lots of lovely messages in the chat. If you are ready to have a chance to read them, you may find them very buoying. Next, I'll introduce Carly Myers, who is a staff attorney at Disability Rights Education and Defense Fund as well. She first joined DREDF, that's the acronym for that Defense Fund, in fall of 2017 as a George Barrett Social Justice Fellow, where she worked on a variety of litigation and legislation and policy initiatives aimed at increasing access to healthcare for low-income people with disabilities. So here you are, Carly. Thanks for joining us today.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. And good evening. So my name is Carly Myers, and as Victor said, I'm a staff attorney with the Disability Rights Education and Defense Fund, or DREDF is our poorly chosen acronym. I am also a person with multiple disabilities, including a mental health disability. You know, core to DREDF's mission is ensuring that people with disabilities are treated with respect, dignity, and equality regarding our lives and also our reproductive capacity. So I was asked to speak here today in relation to a recent victory that DREDF and our coalition partners achieved on behalf of people with disabilities in the state of California who have been targeted for reproductive oppression by the state. Last month, Governor Gavin Newsom signed a $7.5 million budget request to establish the Forced Sterilization Compensation Program, which is a law that will provide reparations to survivors of forced sterilization that occurred in state institutions pursuant to California's eugenics laws, which were on the books between 1909 and 1979. And also to survivors of coerced sterilization in state women's prisons, which occurred after 1979 and as recently as 2016. DREDF, in partnership with the California Latinas for Reproductive Justice, the California Coalition for Women's Prisoners, and Back to the Basics Community Empowerment, has been advocating for reparations for survivors for the past 4 years. And we are heartened to announce that the state has finally stepped up and enacted into law this critical acknowledgement of the state's reproductive violence against our communities. While the establishment of California's sterilization reparations program is an important step forward in acknowledging and addressing the reproductive oppression of people with disabilities, we recognize that it's really only the tip of the iceberg. The reproductive rights of people with disabilities have never really been fully realized in this country or in the state of California, which claims to be one of the most progressive in the nation. Perhaps the most egregious example harkens back to the topic of the reparations bill, which is that the state of California was the most aggressive eugenic sterilizer in the entire country, sterilizing over 20,000 people with disabilities in state institutions. California had on its books a law that directed and affirmatively encouraged the administrators of state hospitals to forcibly sterilize individuals who they, in their broad discretion, deemed unfit for reproduction. So people were labeled, these are just direct quotes from the documents, so that people were labeled moron, imbecile, mentally defective, and they were sterilized without any opportunity to challenge that decision. Disabled people of color, disabled women, and poor people were the groups that were primarily targeted by these heinous laws. It's honestly hard to even comprehend the sheer magnitude of California's abuses, especially when we consider that when the law was repealed in 1979, its abuses did not stop. The forum simply shifted from one carceral setting to another. We know that as recently as 2016, at least 250 additional women were sterilized without proper consents in California women's prisons. Many women didn't even know that the procedure had occurred. Some don't even know to this day. Our bill, which has held many different numbers and authors throughout the years, at its core is a bill that provides a material acknowledgement for survivors. And it raises awareness about the harms that they endured in an effort to ensure that state-sponsored forced sterilization never happens again, and that we continue to advocate to eliminate the vestiges of eugenics that continue to permeate our government policies and institutions. So while the specific goal of the sterilization reparations bill is to bring a semblance of justice to the survivors of state-sponsored reproductive violence, it's part of a broader movement to uplift the reproductive rights of people with disabilities and others who have been targeted for reproductive oppression across settings. To be clear, eugenics ideology, or the belief that some people are more fit to reproduce and be citizens than others, is still very much alive and well in this country. We've seen it in the reproductive oppression of Black women in California prisons, as documented in the recent film Belly of the Beast. We've seen it in ICE detention centers, most recently in Georgia, where it was reported that detained immigrants were being involuntarily sterilized. And perhaps most pertinent to this discussion today, we've seen it in the high-profile discussions of forced birth control on people living under conservatorships, like Britney Spears. We hope that with the media and the power that surrounds California's commitment to providing reparations to its egregious violence, that we can use this energy, that we can use this momentum to continue to uplift the right of every individual to control their own reproductive capacity without state interference or without the interference of others. So thank you for your time today.
Carly, thank you so much for your presentation and for your good work. So now we have a Q&A period. So anyone who has any questions for our panelists, please feel free. Please use the raise your hand button, or you can post your question in the chat. Someone's following the chat. So if you have, I'm gonna see here. So on my version of Zoom, if I click on the reactions button at the bottom of the screen, there's an option to raise my hand. I think some folks, it might be under your more buttons. And again, if you can't find it, you can just put a question in the chat and we'll follow up with you. Once again, if you're on the telephone and you'd like to raise your hand, hit *9 and we'll call on you. And I just wanted to check to see if all of the speakers are still here, because I know that Claudia said that she was maybe leaving early. I don't have the full screen open. Can someone tell me, is Claudia still here? Is Claudia still here?
This is Claudia. I'm still on through the Q&A, but then I'm going to jump off after.
Okay, great. All right. Well, thanks a lot, Claudia, for hanging in there. I think I do see that Ilya had your hand raised.
Yes.
Okay, please.
I just have opportunity just to say how this great people and victim of abuse, what I hear today, like Carly Myers, Erik, Henriques, and now the Carly Myers is attorney. It's not exactly she is victim of abuse, my understanding. But she is very courageous and I say exceptionally attorney. I could find very few attorney who could say truth. Usually I would say conversation with attorney, it's not so pleasant like I'm listening Carly Myers, because most of them work for government and part of the abuse system. And hearing Carly Myers, it's just something very unusual for people who working in this area. So when come to say what I wanted to say, I don't want to take time now. I believe that I will have time to share with everyone about my attitude towards the system, conservatorship, and everything else. Thank you.
Thank you, Ilya. I suppose that Ilya raises the question of how does one who needs support when you're ensnared in the complex network of the government system, how do you get the help, that you need? And maybe each of you could make a comment, or who would like to comment on that question?
I say, it's Erik. I say contact the Mental Health Association of San Francisco's California Peer Run Warm Line, and that's a starting place for assistance. And if you're a San Francisco resident, that can lead to additional peer-based support, and it could also lead to additional resources throughout the state of California. So for those of us who are in California, that's a good starting point for getting mental health support, is through the California Warm Line. And I know that's been posted in the chat box.
Thanks, Erik.
This is Claudia. Another resource is the Protection and Advocacy Agency in your state. In California, it's Disability Rights California, that can provide you with some legal information and some legal supports.
Okay.
Can I talk or?
Fancher, please, of course. That was a question
Okay.
for all of you.
I'm a patient's rights advocate. I have an office in San Francisco, and we have several people here. And you can call us, people can call us, and we can try and help them or connect them. So, I mean, and there's me, I'm one of you guys.
Thank you, Fancher. Any other panelists want to address the question, or shall we go on to Misa? Okay, Misa, you're next then. Hi.
Everybody, wanted to thank all the speakers. I am somebody with lived experience, and after 20 years of work, or 25 years of work, I felt well enough to be able to be a resource to a sibling who's largely institutionalized and under an LPS conservatorship. And some of the questions that I have maybe are a little bit broad, but I think if at least the questions are stated, then it plants the seed for change. What are the laws that need to change to build in the essential checks and balances that are needed? Because clearly, under an LPS conservatorship, it's not working. What are the steps to changing the laws, and who is involved in this process, and how do you get your attention? And just for instance, in my situation, my niece is the conservator for my sister, and her belief systems go counter to what the science says with regard to what is healthy for an individual and actually what my sister wants. For instance, she wanted a COVID-19 vaccine, and the conservator won't allow her to have it. Since 2014, she has wanted to have dental work. They're rotted out of her mouth from bulimia, and the conservator doesn't. And the way that the system works now, the long-term care ombudsman's office is not effective in terms of investigating complaints. I have found that also patients' rights is not effective. I've even found one of the resources, Disability Rights of California. It all seems to fall on deaf ears, and it actually seems as if the laws and in these institutions support the resources that are serving the client rather than the client themselves. Thank you.
Who would like to handle that big question there? It sounds like a situation that's very similar to what Britney Spears is facing.
Yeah, we all need to work on it.
So
We need
what
to
do
get
you
something
think?
organized about how to work on this.
Okay.
So I think people need to be able to challenge things. They have the right to be addressed, and they have a right to our help, to the community help. And we need to change the way things are going, because it seems to be it's whatever is convenient for the people in charge. And there's some kind of a crime, as far as I'm concerned, if you're not allowing what a person needs to have, not allowing them to have it because you have that authority or whatever, and you're making the choices for them. And I'm sure there's some conservators that are very kind and good and everything, but we need to change the law. We need to change the law. We're going to say we're going to be conservators. It doesn't mean you can just do whatever you want forever. We have to change it, and we have to address it, and maybe people can be able to get writs like they do for the year-long conservatorship. They challenge it, and they can challenge it. That's all I'm going to say. I'm talking too much anyway.
And those of us with lived experience in the system who have been conserved, we need to speak our minds. We need to tell our stories. And I think this is an important forum that's currently going on right now. I just think that those of us who have gone through the the experience and have recovered the trauma that conservatorship has inflicted upon us, we need to talk, we need to speak. I think that's a good first start. So that's my thoughts.
If you allow me say a few words, I think we don't need to change the system. We don't need to change the law. We need to abolish the system of murdering and hurting people. It's mean conservatorship system.
I didn't understand the last sentence.
Okay.
He said that I think that Claudia said that he's not so much in favor of changing the law as he is sort of taking on the law head on and abolishing the mentality that sort of approaches certain humans as disposable. And
that.
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. That would be part of it for sure. That's awful. People are really good at disposing other people all over the place. Yeah. And we just can't let it happen. We've been letting it happen.
So is this something that like the Mad Mob or other community organizing for the mental health community can begin to have leverage? And where part of what of Molly's question was like, where do we start? What laws need to be changed or augmented? Is this the kind of thing that I could just walk into, like David Chu is my assembly member, and like have a sit down with him? Would that be a kind of an effective way, or is it at a point where we need to like go in and en masse? What are your thoughts? Imade, your story about your hospitalization and going in a gown on a gurney sounds very similar to what Mila was describing, where she's at a disadvantage. Do you have any thoughts?
I don't know a whole lot about the laws, so I defer to those who do. Claudia, do you have anything to share about that?
Yeah, this is Claudia. I think that there's this sort of opportunity presented by all the attention to Britney Spears, but it's also a little tricky because it could kind of go in strange directions, the attention. And so if we can figure out a way to come together and maybe have some all day, well, I don't know, some all like a sustained conversation, whether it's across a day or across a email about what it is we want to accomplish. I think that, you know, one of the big problems in California is that once people are under conservatorship, it's like Kafkaesque for people to leave conservatorship. And there are differences among the conservatorships, but for certain conservatorships, you can't, you know, hire your own lawyer and no one listens to your stated wishes. And once you're under conservatorship, the fact that you say you want to leave conservatorship has no value at all. And so we want to figure out how to change that system so that people who want to leave conservatorship can be empowered to do so. And then we want to, I think we want to develop alternatives and ways to divert people so that they don't go into conservatorship in the first place, that they have the supports they need, if they need decision-making supports or financial supports, you know, help with those kinds of decisions, that's provided rather than conservatorship.
That's good.
Okay, thank you, Claudia. I'm going to help Victor out and call on some people. Let's see, I see Allison and then Cheryl afterwards.
Allison.
Hello, my name's Allison. These are excellent stories, and I'm glad of people's courage for telling them. We also have stories. I'm the mother of someone with serious mental illness who has delusions that put her in danger. And conservatorship, I think, has lengthened her life, and we do not have an alternative yet for people like her. That's my impression. And I'm wondering if anybody can think of any situation in which an LPS conservatorship can save a life, extend a life, keep people away from meth, for example. My daughter and other people in my friends' families think that meth is a good thing, that it's a good treatment for mental illness, that it makes voices go away, that it's recommended by doctors. We have many stories where we're seeing terrible problems from many different angles, and we're coming out with two solutions: have more conservatorships or fewer. I'm not sure where to go with this, but thank you for listening.
Thank you, Allison. Yeah, would any of our speakers like to respond?
I can speak to that. So what I'm hearing is that maybe in some circumstances that conservatorship would be okay. Is that what I'm hearing? So I mean, that's what I heard. So to speak to that, you know, when I was doing crisis work as a peer counselor in Marin County, I encountered a couple of situations which I really had to think about my stance against my anti-conservatorship stance, and I'm still torn by this thought in this conversation. But I recall a gentleman that we were working with who was repeatedly in the jail for mental health challenges, and he was somebody who he'd be in the jail or wherever he was at, his delusions would tell him to drink so much water that he would actually be hospitalized because he eliminated all of his you know, all the good chemicals in his body through just drinking so much water. And so there was a lot of conversations at the time about, is there any circumstance in which conservatorship is okay? And again, I'm torn because this gentleman managed to survive in the Marin County community as a homeless individual. And he had the support of his father, but the concern is when his father, who's an elderly man, passes away, what will become of this individual in Marin County. So it did make me think that there may be circumstances in which some type of support, I'm not saying conservatorship necessarily, but some type of support to assist folks from just inadvertently drinking themselves to death through water and potentially killing themselves. It was a complicated situation. So I have had that question in my head also. Thanks.
Let me just ask a few questions to Carly. She's a professional.
Ilya, can you
Yes.
hold on, please? We have
Okay.
other folks with their hands up, and we're limited by time. So if you'd like, you can type your comments into the chat, and folks can review them there. Okay. Cheryl has had her hand up for quite some time, so please, Cheryl, go right ahead.
Yes, hi. So yeah, so this is a problem on all levels, in organizing and in mental health all around, and especially advocacy for people of color with disabilities who have of color and mental health. My brother lives in a board and care. He's gone through Tuscadero, California, Napa State Mental State Hospital since back in the late 70s. So I've been watching this for a long time. And as far as prevention in mental health, I think it would be really, really as a very powerful prevention is to have people of color, more people of color in mental health, you know, all around. He's never had a person that was, I forget what you call the medical people that are in charge of them. He's never had a Black person ever since the 1970s. And so that would be a really, you know, I could see that as a really, really good prevention and, you know, and possibly funding go out of mental health, actually going to fund people of color to train under mental health and mental advocacy. That's the word I was looking for, excuse me. He never had a clinician that was Black since the late 70s up to this very date. The homes that he has been in under Conard House, mostly Conard House, yes. No Black aides. No one to advocate for him like Imade, who is the same color that can relate. So it's very, very important. And so I had to put that out there as far as not only advocacy, but it would also, you know, it would prevent a lot of people from going in. And I think I'm glad it's finally getting out there how important it is to see yourself in what's going on. So anyway, I really wanted to share that. And I'm going to be leaving. So, but thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cheryl.
Thank you so much. I agree with you.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
I know. We need more Black people. We need more people, all people. We need all people.
Do any of the speakers want to respond to Cheryl's comments?
Yeah, I just thank you so much for raising that issue. I think Black therapists are possibly 2 to 4% of the American Psychology Association. And, we know that Black folks are often funneled to punitive care, which is psychiatric treatment centers. They're often funneled to psychotropic drugs. They're more often diagnosed with schizophrenia and psychosis. For instance, for myself, the other drug that I was forced on in addition to lithium was Zyprexa. It was an antipsychotic drug, even though I did not show any type of psychotic features. And schizophrenia is so often diagnosed in Black folks that it's been called the protest diagnosis. It's been called a diagnosis that they would use for Black protesters, because they thought that being distrustful of the government, which they should be, and wanting to challenge the government that is often white supremacist, racist, that was a sign of psychosis. And there were even advertisements from prescription drug companies that showed Black protesters and advertised their drug through showing Black protesters. So all of this whole system of disappearing Black folks and punishing them and restraining them is rooted in white supremacy, and it's able to exist for so long because we do not have proper representation in the mental health system. But on the other side, I also want to say this, and when I was in my first hospitalization, I was physically restrained by Black nurses. I was threatened with forced injection by Black nurses, and unfortunately, I was thrown into a solitary confinement, aka the isolation by Black nurses. And what that speaks to is the fact that a lot of the Black folks that are in these psychiatric centers have no power to change the system at all. They are carrying out the orders of people who are racist. So most likely those nurses that I spent time with, that I spoke with, they were cool. I liked them. I didn't have anything against them. But when it comes down to who tackles who injects who, a lot of times that's Black folks, and they don't have the ability to argue and to disagree with the higher ups. And so not only do I feel like we need representation, we need power. And to be honest with you, I'm more of an abolitionist. I don't even want them to exist, to be honest. And I often have said that, like, I don't want Black slave masters. I don't want a Black face to people who are going to hurt me. I want the system to not exist at all, to be honest with you. And I do also want to validate the concerns of folks who are saying conservatorship saved, my loved one's life. I want to honor the fact that I know there's love and there's care in that. But I do think that we have to focus on preventative measures. We shouldn't even got to the point where we need conservatorship. Like, people should have had preventative care when they're in kindergarten, when they're in pre-K, whenever they first show those signs, there should be preventative care. There should be education of young children of what symptoms are. So when they have those experiences, they have a support network that they can go to express their concerns. So I think the question is, we have to move the focus from the end of the system of conservatorships to the beginning, so that we never have to need these in the first place. So.
Yeah, thank you so much, Imade. That's such an important point, and just, starting from the ground up, and that it's deeper than, just who's delivering the care, but also the whole system itself is the problem. I see we have a couple of people who've had their hands up for a while, so I want to make sure we get to Ludmila and then Vidal. And I think that will be it for Q&A, unless someone else has a burning question.
Hi, I'm on one of the continuum of care boards for dealing with homeless issues in another county in the Bay Area. And I'm astounded by every speaker here and every story that I've heard. I myself, do have a history of mental issues and trauma, mental health issues, but I haven't faced the kind of obstacles and treatments, and to the degree that many of the speakers here have. Thank you so much. My question is really if anybody can help me understand. I am concerned with people who become homeless and then who are getting into housing, permanent support housing, and I'm wondering to what degree, if somebody is looking at supportive services in that kind of situation, are they in effect because of their financial situation and because of their disability status being put in a conservatorship as far as their choices? What, even if it hasn't been legally signed, can anybody speak to that as to what degree that is happening in the Bay Area and in California? Thank you. I don't know to what degree it's a problem. My instinct is that people are not given really free and open choice on things, and that there is, I would be surprised if there isn't too much coercion, given what I do know.
I could perhaps, I mean, I'm not a scholar in this area, but it sounds like what you're talking about is the fact that even though there's no judge involved, by virtue of their poverty, their alleged supportive housing setting, where they may have actually got bullies and abusive clinicians or front desk people, et cetera, they may experience a level of neglect and powerlessness and hopelessness, and a certain or a large portion of their disability check goes to the provider, and they are left sort of at the mercy of the system. I could see how that could be construed as a different kind of institutionalization or conservatorship, but that's the only thing that I could say, and I'm hardly a professional with a great deal of knowledge of it.
Yeah, I'm kind of asking the question is if stories are, getting back to people, and I think my main concern as far as people's rights is, are people being over medicated, in response to trauma, instead of being given the support to recover from what has led them to be, in the position they find themselves in. But it's a question. Thank you. If we don't know the answer to that, that's fine. I can keep learning. Thank you.
Thank you, Ludmila. Do any of our speakers have an answer to that question? Erik, Imade, Fancher?
Well,
The challenging
I
one.
think it's difficult. People are, you're saying she's saying if there's somebody that's sort of taking care of them, but, and they get all their money or something, or some kind of a thing like that. The only thing that would happen is someone like that was hospitalized, maybe was taken into PES, and they thought maybe she should stay there for a few days, and maybe they see some issues and problems and things, and they want to work it out. I don't know. It could be a situation where it's not a bad thing that they wound up being, going into the hospital and having other people get a look at what condition they were in and how they were doing. And so their organizations and all, okay, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, somebody just came in my office and started talking to me. Anyway, I think that it's very hard if they don't have some kind of, I don't know how we can intrude in that kind of thing, where there's a person, we don't even know if they're on conservatorship or they're not. They just have someone that's, taking care of them, but is really not. I don't know how, if we find out what's going on, we can try to do some intrusion, but I don't know what else to do. Unless it involves psych services or something, some kind of community services. And certainly if people are brought in and they go into programs and that are just there to provide food and shelter, some people may be able to identify who needs the help. And then we have to have an organization who is willing to try to help.
Okay, yeah. All right, thank you, thank you. Yeah, I'm approaching the problem from a different slant than what the primary focus of this, but I hate to see people have their rights taken away.
Yes. Oh,
In more ways than they need to have in order, and for longer periods of time. Thank you for all that you're doing to help here. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you,
So you
Ludmila.
can give me one few words.
Sorry,
Say.
Ilya, we have just one more person who hasn't gotten to ask a question yet. Vidal, and then I think this will be our last question, and then we're going to go into breakout rooms.
Yes, my name is Vidal. I'm System Change Advocate for Resources for Independence here in Fresno County. And I've had experience with 2 consumers that I assisted. And this is kind of wanting to know more about the public authority. In Fresno, that's who decided to bring conservatorship to 2 of my consumers. Now, they had family members. The family members refused to take any responsibility. So the public authority then became their guardians. And with words that really I couldn't understand at the time, I understand them now a little bit, but they talked about conservatorship of person and estate.
oh.
And so that to me is a scary thought now that I understand exactly what they did. And I was subpoenaed to one of the consumers days in front of the judge, and I pretty much testified on what we did, and basically what I had testified to in this one consumer was that we reached out to she had 2 children that really had not want anything to do with her. So, and because the court already knew that, because they had reached out and I didn't know that, but it was important to acknowledge that, because not that she couldn't be independent, because we also testified that she could, but I think the bigger picture was the lack of family or support. She kind of kept to herself, and that was her right to do that. And we were providing services and support, but not the kind of support that she needed in regards to her conservatorship. So I kind of want to know a little bit more about other counties and public authorities. Carly, do you know anything about in regards to the legal part of that? Is that prevalent throughout the counties? And thank you very much for allowing me to speak. Over.
Okay, thank you. Idel Martina, it's a nice name.
Thank you for the question. Carly, would you like to answer?
I'm sorry, I don't really have a substantive response to that, but I can bring the question back to Claudia, who probably will.
I think Claudia might have had to go. So maybe we can.
Well, I meant after the.
Oh, after. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, then we can get back to you about that, Vidal.
All right. Thank you.
Hi, this is Sylvia. I like to say that, Amalda, I agree with you that preventive, the wellness has to start very young, the subject psychology, when only you go to the college, then you learn it. That's too late, right? Because when you go college, you are already close to 20 years old.
Yeah, thank you, Sylvia. All right, so I'm going to turn it back to Victor, and he's going to introduce our breakout room. So we'll have more chance to share in the smaller groups.
Thank you, Rhea, and thanks for handling the questions. I got a little bit over involved in them myself, and I'm glad we were able to get everybody's questions covered. So here it says on my prompt sheet, introduce break rooms. So we're going to get split up into smaller groups. I don't know how many, but in the groups, there are a few prompts here for for you and your group members to consider. So the first question is, after hearing from the speakers, what feelings are coming up for you? Another question is what kind of response would you want if you are having a mental health crisis? And the third question is, how does ableism and mental health stigma affect conservatorship laws? So these are some recommended questions that you might want to talk about in your small group. And we'll have, well, we were initially scheduled for 15 minutes, but we're running about 15 minutes late. So what do you want to do, Rhea?
How about 10 minutes and then we'll reconvene?
Okay. Okay, and people will we get like a 2-minute warning or a 1 minute? How does that gonna work?
Yeah, I'll give a 2-minute warning.
Great. So what's gonna happen is you'll get a dialog box on the front inviting you to join a room. So you either hit enter or mouse over to the word join and click on it, and you'll go right into that group, okay?
What are the 3 questions? Could you put it in the chat?
Yep, she's gonna put it in the chat.
Every time I go down south.
Wonderful beaches too.
Yeah, that's what I hear. And I'm from the East Bay. Hi, Rhea.
Hey, Regina. Hi, Debbie.
Hi, Rhea.
Nice to meet you, especially.
Yep. Wow. Well, I'll speak up and say I got angry. Something has to be done now.
Oh.
And I'm just learning about supportive decision making. I have a lot more to learn. And, you know, I just hope that your group and other groups, advocacy groups could come together, you know, and start talking to our elected officials and find somebody that's willing to sponsor a bill about supportive decision making.
Yeah, I'm just learning as well. And thank you, Rhea, for this is just so robust and in-depth and just really super important. I think from my recent experience working a little bit with the Refund Coalition through Oakland's budget cycle and learning more about their macro program, which is a program of mobile crisis responders. And I know that San Francisco has one similar called CART. And so they do have clinicians who come out with community members to answer mental health distress calls and other calls that are nonviolent, diverting them from the police. And so I see that on the front end, you know, because things are on the front end. And then here, you know, it's like when folks are actually institutionalized. So we call that at the end of the line or at the back end. So I'm just thinking about how many steps, you know, because I'm new like to this. It's like how many steps are there before like a person is going through a mental health crisis to where they are institutionalized, and how many opportunities do we have to interrupt that cycle? So that's just part of my questions.
I think another thing we need to, I work for Disability Rights California as a peer self-help trainer and person with lots of lived experience, more than I want to say. At any rate, I found out that in some counties, the public defender, who usually represents clients at a certification review hearing, that they rotate. every 6 months, okay, this lawyer, this public defender has to deal with this, and then they switch. And in some counties, like Napa County, they had somebody that had been there for, I don't know, 2-3 years doing this work, and then they got another job offer, so somebody else had to, step up to the plate, and they need to be trained. They need to be trained about third-party assistance, decision support. I'm so upset. I'm just babbling. Any rate, they need to be trained to really be good advocates, because their law schools don't teach them anything about mental health law.
Right.
Any rate.
Thank
Yeah,
you
that's
for
a really
that.
good
That was
point.
very informative. I appreciate you.
I appreciate
Yeah,
you
yeah,
all.
I'm late. I'm late. I went to restroom.
That's okay. It's good to take a break. Hi, Sylvia.
2 hours straight, yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to say hi to Sylvia and Mary. If you want to
Yeah.
introduce yourself
Yeah.
or share anything.
Oh, I like those panelists, the speakers. They bring all their stories, and who is that? Adelaide? Oh, who is? What is that? The black girl. What's her name?
Imade.
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 Oh yeah, wow. She bring out a lot of good points. I think it has to be started young. The psychology textbook, touch on those subjects so that kids themselves can be aware of self-awareness. Kids themselves can be aware of what is going on with them, and also can recognize if their friends is something wrong with friends. They can also identify, what is the trigger, what are the signs to look for, and so on. So wellness, that's why I was saying in STA, I don't hear anybody talking about wellness. Always about, healthcare, we have to, it's already too late going and get to end up in hospital or see doctor. Their model in the medical is about the, about the sickness. What is a model? They're not in the wellness. They once you are being labeled, it is the end. I mean, you have it.
The medical model.
Yeah, medical
as
model
opposed to
is
the
not,
recovery
good.
model. Yeah.
You know what? As if this is with you long term. You are being stuck. You see that one was saying about that.
Yeah, Fancher was talking about that. Like the difference between thinking that
no, they are very productive, and they are have another thing. There is one. I'm very poor with remembering people's name. I think the old lady,
Fancher.
Yeah. I guess we grew up, right? We know about this. Sometimes gaslighting, they want you to believe that you are dumb. And then you assimilate it, like she said, that word, assimilate it, and you believe yourself that you are dumb. That's the way it goes. It's very cruel. It's just like the schoolyard bully. That is a way of bully too. That's not good. Instead of empathy and love and caring, it's the opposite. I was angry when I hear those. I was angry.
Yeah, me too. Yeah. I wonder, Mary, would you like to share anything that
relating to what she was just speaking about? I just came across the term internalized ableism on my Quora feed, and somebody had a quote from, it sounded like a textbook, and they talked about how, unlike other things like racism, in racism, you're born into a group. And so you have that community, that common community. But when you have a disability, you're often born into a family structure that doesn't acknowledge it and promotes ableism upon you. And you basically grow up and internalize that ableist attitude within yourself, and so you blame yourself for your own problems, because you don't have a community to identify with. And so I think that relates to what she was just speaking with, and yeah, I'm really frustrated. I'm hoping to find ways to advocate for myself, because getting angry, well, and it's difficult. I mean, to put forth your viewpoint and be and people will say that you're resistant, you're non-compliant, and act against you. And actually, I'm running into a situation with gynecologists wanting to do things and not telling me why they want to do them, and telling me that I, am not compliant when I haven't been told what to do, and just, I am getting angry.
Time to find a different gynecologist. If they won't give you true informed consent, which includes the reason why they want to do whatever they want to do, then they're supposed to time for a different person, because that's just not right. It's your body, and you get the decision making on it. And you can't make a decision if you don't have all the facts, and the doctor's supposed to give you the facts.
I like to bring something. Initially, it would look like off the Jesus Lord. But you see, when my mother-in-law was in the nursing home, we visit her, dutifully once a week, right? So conservatorship, how often did he, for example, visit, and then how long he stay, and then did he have a checklist that he planned to ask or talk, and then did he write notes, and then show it to the person, and then do you agree? Co-sign. That's a way to do. Otherwise, they will say different story and a shit.
All right.
You know what?
We're out of time, so we're gonna be bumped out of the breakout room, but it was really nice.
Oh, I love it. I really love it. These.
Yeah, thank you
This
so
is
much.
awesome.
Mm-hmm.
So now we're back, and the program is scheduled to end in just a few minutes. But I checked with Rhea before we started this whole thing, and the Zoom will not cut us off hard if we go over a little bit. But I do want to be respectful of everyone's time, and in a few minutes that we have here, are there any comments that folks would like to share with the general group?
Hey, Victor, this is Liza. I would like to get clarification of the hours and if the warm line is statewide.
You want to know the
Yes, it is.
hours of the warm line and if it's statewide?
It's 7:24 and it's statewide.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Yeah.
I want just make a few comments.
Sure.
Thank you, Victor, for organizing these meetings and let people speak. And it's a pleasure to be in the presence of the people, even who suffer a lot, but honest and good people that use for profiteering for big pharma and all the system of probate court and attorney and everyone else who are making self-profiteering. But if you could make some, when you're organizing, give everyone, maybe for a few minutes, that everybody would have their own time, speak, and would not interrupt like me. I wanted to say a lot, but did not have time, so I tried a few times to talk, but actually I didn't have opportunity to share with the people my concern. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ilya, for expressing your suggestion. I appreciate that. Does anyone else have any comments about the program, about the content of the program before we begin to wrap up?
This is
Hi.
David.
Yeah, David.
So I just want to say that the speakers, the 5 speakers, were amazing, and the powerful personal stories, especially from people like Imade, were just so heartfelt and touching. And I actually learned a lot, even though I thought I knew something about it. Clearly, the issue of conservatorships is a difficult one. The thought of taking away people's personal agency and rights. And yet it's clear that there's some people with serious mental illness that do need some level of care. And so how do you balance that out without being abusive to others who have care forced on them that they don't want or need? So, I mean, I don't have all the answers, but the proposal for an alternate form of conservatorship that is more decision-making based, that people have more personal say, I think would be good, but we'd have to bring that to our state legislators to create this new kind of conservatorship light type law. So that's one of the things I got out of this meeting, is maybe something new to advocate for. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Did someone else have a comment? And then I think we're going to have to start to wind down.
Yeah, this is Liza.
Yeah.
Hi, thank you everyone so much. And I'd like to see another forum where we could put together some actions and looking at dismantling what is happening, what really is in legislation, and to move forward with a new history of changing how this looks, as well as creating culturally responsive therapy so we can prevent the 5150s and allow people to work at their level, be in an environment that makes them comfortable at their level, and meeting people where they're at. And I think that's where the new direction is. If we continue to go backwards, we're going to continue with the disparities, the trauma, and the racial inequalities. So please, let's come together again and make a state action of what we want as to see for ours that we feel are suffering with mental health challenges and help to rebuild self-agency. And that's coming from somebody who is an addict, mental health issues, and I love my agency, and it was given back to me by this city, and I think we can do it again. So please, let's get together as a community for the people, by the people, and change it like they did in the very, very early days of the mental health reform and our rights as mental health people with disabilities. Thank you.
Thank you, Liza. I see there are 2 people who have their hands up, and I want to give you a minute. I just want to say that's a great segue, and with David as well. The Mad Mob is sending up flares. Please come join us, come work with us. This work requires all of us coming together. That question about stigma and ableism and how it impacts positively or negatively the conservatorship laws, I'm a firm believer that we need to create a voice and speak up. So we meet twice a month, and if you let us know that you want to hear from us ongoingly, we will, you'll get invitations and announcements and all of that, and you can follow us. So with that said, let me call on the next person. Who is it, Ray? I can't see it.
I see Ludmilla has a hand up.
Okay, will you go next then, Ludmilla?
Yeah, I was really struck by the statement that one of the first speakers made at about 4:15, where it's an either or. You know, you're either considered to be sane or you're considered to be not. I'm wondering if there's anything along the lines of conservatorship that could be more specific to the actual observed problems and incapacities that a person is speaking to. In other words, that, you know, like, so let's say the person has become extraordinarily difficult with numbers, so they're no longer capable of carrying their own checkbook because strange things happen, or they're no longer capable of driving, or, you know, there's like where there's actual, in the language of the action that's taken, there's that we have observed that, you know, Mr. So-and-so has done X, Y, Z, and then also a question be asked: is that behavior situational? In other words, did the person become irresponsible financially when they had just changed their medications on something and so they can't add anymore or something? I mean, just so that, you know, we could get a sense of if that's a temporary state or a stress-induced state. And then it becomes queryable, rather than saying, oh, you have been declared completely incompetent across the boards. I've never in my life met somebody who is completely incompetent across the boards. You know, I have met people of genius who have what I call sinkholes, you know, where there's a portion of their life that it's like, what happened? Okay, you know, but yeah, so rather than declare them, I think you see what I'm saying. Can we have something that is more specific, that is more like a designated power of attorney, for example, that learns from that, where you can have more specific areas, or in order to control certain behaviors, have it, or for a certain period of time, where it's designated on the actual observed behavior rather than problematic situation, rather than on a judgment call of the person's character and capacity as an entire being.
Yeah, thank you.
Would that be possible?
Yeah, excellent thoughts.
And that's what I would like if I became incapacitated at some point in my life, either temporarily or permanently, was that there would be a clear observation of the types of incapacity that I specifically had, rather than across the boards taking away of my rights and ability to speak for myself in the areas where I still am capable of doing so.
Nice, thank you, thank you. Mary, and I think that with this, after Mary makes her comments, we'll move into appreciations and announcements. So Mary, you had something you wanted to share with us?
I guess after all this, I am really questioning how much the treatment is actually the causation and exacerbation of the issues involved. And I know myself that I was over medicated to the point where I was having MRIs and seeing neurologists, and luckily I changed providers, and but it had gotten to where I was really not functional, and I lost my home basically. I was living in a home that I had owned for 23 years, and I had to give it up.
So
cure is better than the disease.
What was that?
Cure better than worse than the disease. Cure is worse than the disease. So not the right medicine.
I see, yeah. I'm sorry that happened. Thank you.
So and I think it probably happens a lot that people, you know, they start to lose their agency and protest, and you know, we've talked about it, and then they're seen as non-compliant and are punished for it. So anyway, I guess that's my comment, and I've taken up too much time. I know our time is limited. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing that. You know, As we wrap up, I'll start off with the appreciations and the announcements. In terms of an announcement, I'll just say again that the Mad Mom meets twice a month. We meet on the second Friday and the fourth Friday of every month. And we're doing this work and developing other action items for us to take to the streets and make things change. And in terms of appreciations, of course, I'm very grateful to the speakers and for this opportunity to be your moderator today. And in fact, I was very on the tangents of developing this program today. And so I've been very grateful to the core folks who put it together and made it happen. So thank you so much. And thanks to the mob and SDA. And I probably said my gratitude's too long, so I'll stop. Please, if everybody does that many, we won't ever leave tonight, but please feel free to offer up something to share with the group if you would like.
It's Liza.
Yeah.
Thank you again for the opportunity for this to be brought to a public forum, to be open for discussion. And of course, I have to give a shout out to my favorite mentor, my hero, Fancher Larson, a major advocate and movement maker way before our time. So thank you all.
It was all of us. It was all of us working together. That's what we're doing now, and we'll continue to be doing. And I love you all. I do. This is what makes it happen. This is the good stuff. Getting down to work and doing it. Yeah.
Yeah,
Anyone
I'd
else?
love to thank Victor for being, for being such a wonderful host tonight. Yes, you did a wonderful job, and
thank you.
Yeah, and I'd also love to thank all of the Mad Mob members who helped make this happen, and Fancher and Liza, Colette, who isn't here tonight, David, yeah, and just all of our speakers too, and everyone at MHA who also made this an awesome event, especially Peter and Trey and Jeremy. Yeah, this has been really wonderful.
Okay.
You want to just punch your announcements or gratitudes into the chat, you can do that as well.
What?
With that, if there's not anybody else, I don't see any other hands up. Why don't we, actually, why don't Peter or Jeremy or Trey, do you want to make a pitch for MHA, SF, the Arise program or anything else there, or how people can get in touch?
Sure. Thanks for remembering us. Yeah, I'm Peter.
Sure.
I'm with the Mental Health Association. And yeah, we really appreciate being able to join in like this. I mean, I think it would be great if we can work together even more so, or as much as possible. We have a mental health advocacy group that meets twice a month as well. It's called Arise, and the next meeting is going to be next Wednesday at 2 o'clock. So we can provide some information about that too. I think it'd be really great if we could find ways for Mad Mob and Arise to really, work more together. I know we've talked about it a little bit, but anyway, we're over time. So, but thanks very much for having us. And it was great. It was a really wonderful event. I'm glad we could be here. Thank you.
Thanks, Peter. Okay. Well, with that, I'm having separation anxiety, but I'll go take a walk. It's delightful to see you all. Thank you all.
All our kids.
We'll see you again.
Separation anxiety.
Take care. Can you imagine separation anxiety with 100 people? I think I'll have to take a nap.
Good job, Victor. Really good job.
Yeah.
Thanks. Good to see you all. Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody. Peace out.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye. Thank you.